upstream production operations at Shell India Markets Private Limited. He leads the global operations for the upstream production and non-ERP portfolio and is based in Shell IT hub located in Bangalore. He has 20 plus years of experience and worked in 3 facets of IT, that's services, consulting, and end user GIC in oil and gas, banking, and retail. Welcome, Mr. Kartik.
Thank you, Shweta. Good morning, everyone. I'll try again. Good morning.
It's about every one of you watching.
Let's spend a few minutes on the Shell video.
Every person out there, which includes our families, our friends. This is a film about the world we all share. It's about 7 billion of us, becoming 8 billion soon, and then 9 billion. And about every single one of us needing energy to prosper. Because the absence of energy limits choices. Its presence creates them. Our world needs more energy so that individuals, communities, and countries may attain or sustain socio-economic progress. But the way energy is currently provided and used is contributing to climate change, which threatens the well-being of current and future generations. Our world needs more and cleaner energy. This, we know, is a huge global undertaking, which requires collaboration with government, industry, society. And we are up for the challenge, because innovation and care are in our DNA. Taking on challenges to help the world progress is what we have done since the day we started. This is about every one of us working relentlessly every single day to power progress together. By providing more and cleaner energy solutions. Let's make the future.
Good morning again. Some of you are still streaming in from your coffee breaks. It's interesting and a hard act to follow, especially when distinguished speakers before me have spoken about the value of BA, where innovation is headed, where agility is headed. And I was speaking to Shilpa, thanks for the introduction, and she said, you're in the oil and gas industry. That's a very old industry. So clearly that must be very slow. Where does agility really fit in? It's all about, and she was mentioning, you go to the petrol pump, just put the pump in. Where is Agile in this, right? So I thought it's useful to spend the next 40 odd minutes to explain where agility fits in the oil and gas industry, okay? So let's look at the agenda for today. Spend a few minutes on what we are about, what Royal Dutch Shell does. Spend a few minutes on the India focus, what we do in India in particular. There's going to be a cool case study on robotics. And I keep going back to this example that we are more than a 100-year-old industry, but we still do some cool stuff. So an example on that. Followed by 2 case studies, one on the Shell Market Hub, which is from our downstream side of business. Then one calling, in the upstream side, it's called Prelude, which is currently our pride today in Shell. Then I'll talk about a few minutes on what is the role of a BA in Shell. And I think that's something that we really think is where a BA should focus on in the future. And finally, a bit of a wrap up. Before I dive in, let me have a show of hands in terms of how many of you have been anywhere close to an oil and gas industry in terms of exposure. Okay, that's about half the crowd. So hopefully it will be a bit of a learning experience as well today. Right, so let me dive in, talk a little bit about Shell and what RDS or Royal Dutch Shell really does. We are one of the biggest oil and gas and petrochemical companies in the world. Huge amount of people, 92,000 people work for Shell, free cash flow of about 21 billion. In fact, in 2016, our earnings were $3.5 billion. There's a lot of statistics up there, 30 million consumers. There's a small line in small font. We have 43,000 Shell retail outlets. Let me repeat, 43,000 retail outlets. And most of you might be touching the downstream side of the business, which is the retail business, right? So these are the petrol pumps. This is what you really see typically. But we are much more than just that. 30.9 million tons per annum of LNG. Some of you may not know what LNG is, liquid natural gas. This is the fossil fuel, which is the cleanest fossil fuel. So we spend a lot of our focus on LNG. In addition, 2% of the world population relies on our energy. 70 countries is where we are present today. That's really massive. 50% of our share of production was natural gas. As I said, natural gas is a key component and a key future driver for Shell. I'll pick out 2 or 3 numbers here. We spend $1 billion on R&D. $1 billion on R&D, that's massive. And there are a lot of companies which have less than $1 billion as their overall revenue, right? So we spend $1 billion on just R&D. We believe in generating clean energy in a social and a responsible manner for the environment as well. And hence, there are 2 numbers which I want to focus on. There's a number called 1 million ton, which is the bottom right. That's the amount of CO2 that we really push into the land, and we store it because it's a greenhouse gas. We want to work in an environmentally friendly way. So we actually push a greenhouse gas into the land so that it doesn't go into the air. And for us, social responsibility is very key, so we spend $102 million on voluntary services as well. And we have something known as the Shell Foundation. So when you have a few minutes, look it up as well. So in summary, a very big company, a lot of employees, and a mammoth company in the oil and gas sector and petrochemicals. I'll spend a few minutes on explaining the Shell business itself. Some of you, as I said, would have exposure only to the downstream side where you see the petrol pumps. We are much, much more bigger than that. So let's start off with the top right, 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock sort of, if I use the clock analogy. So we are into exploration. So we need to find oil, we need to find gas. So we dig wells, both onshore and offshore, right? Onshore means on land, offshore obviously is in the sea. And we can go really deep. We can go up to a few kilometers in depth to really find where oil and gas is. So that's the exploration side of the business. Not every well would have oil and gas. And so once we find the wells that are of interest, we would move on to the next phase, and that's development and extraction. This is where we really develop the fields or the wells, right? So the wells, we have found the oil, we have found the gas, and we move on to producing it, and this is production. This is an area that I actually come from an IT standpoint. I support the production operations for Shell globally. So that's production. So you actually got the stuff out of the well. We also do production of bitumen. In Canada, as an example, there is something known as tar sands. So this is actually land. It has to be mined, and it has got tar and oil mixed. So we just don't have to look for oil and gas in the seas or on the land, but there is tar sands as well. And that's what about is extracting bitumen. Moving on to number 3. So once we have extracted, we have developed, we have produced, we actually have to refine this, right? So it's crude oil. Crude oil and gas will have impurities. So we need to get rid of the impurities, and that's where the refinery comes in. That's the downstream part of our business. It's a massive part of our business. Some of you might have seen pictures of refinery plants. These are massive, right? And I'll explain what happens behind the scenes a little bit. So we spend a lot of our effort refining oil and gas into fuel and lubricants. We also convert gas to liquids. Natural gas can be converted into fuel like diesel. So in Shell, Qatar as an example, which is one of our biggest sites, we actually convert natural gas into liquid, which can be directly used as fuel. So in addition, we also are investing into biofuels and into wind. as I said, we do want to move more and more towards a cleaner energy. Talking about biofuels, we are actually leveraging a technology called IH2, which is a proprietary technology belonging to GTI in the US, but we are leveraging that along with our partners in the ecosystem, wherein any non-food biomass material can actually be converted into fuel, right? So talking about cleaner energy, that's really key. Wind energy is also an area that we invest significantly, and some of you who like to really follow the technology, Shell has also taken a stake in a company that generates wind energy from kites. So you can just fly a kite, and instead of expensive wind mill sort of thing, the kites go up in the air and they actually drag the cable that moves the generator, and then you can create power. So look it up, it's on YouTube. It's quite fascinating. So, so that's the manufacturing and the production. So once we have the fuel, we need to get it to the customers eventually, right? So that people like you can use it. That's where the transport and the trading kicks in. LNG, I mentioned, is one of the fuels of the future, and it is about liquefying gas, the natural gas. So in fact, at minus 162 degrees centigrade, if there's any chemistry folks around, the natural gas will actually become liquid. Why LNG? Why not leave it in a gas state? Because if you convert it into liquid, it's much more easier to transport. Simple as that, right? Put it in a container and you can transport it. So LNG is a big part of our business, so we have to transport and we have to trade. So trading is a bit like investment banking. So there is a supply, there is a demand, and that's what sets the price. So today, the price of crude is about 50, but in international markets, it's actually traded. So demand, supply match, so it keeps going up and down. So it's on the stock markets, right? So that's the trading part of the business. So we take where the demand is, we look at where the supply is, and try to do the trade. I talked about liquefying natural gas so that it's easier to transport, but once you transport it, you need to convert it back to a gas. So that's regasification. And that's a part of the transport and trading, right? And finally, going on to the last bit, we get it to the actual retail pumps so that you can use it to power your vehicles, right? So in addition to just the fuel, lubricants and aviation is a big part of our business, both in B2C and in B2B as well. So that's a quick tour on what Shell does. So it's just not about petrol pumps. I know that's where we see Shell often, but that's a huge business that we are talking about. Okay? Right, so I'll talk a little bit about the energy challenge that we face today. A huge population growth in the world, in India, in China, everywhere. The population is massively increasing. That creates a lot of demand. I remember, I'm originally from Bangalore, so I remember when I was a school student and a college student, I mean, the traffic in Bangalore was not as much as what we see today. In fact, the whole of the outer ring road stretch, I never visited it even once. I'm from the old Bangalore, we call it Jayanagar. It's not very far from here. But then there's been a boom in the industry. Tier 1 cities like Bangalore, the whole population is converging. And when Tier 1 cities grow, Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities grow as well. So the huge population increase, there's a growing demand. And when there is growing demand, there's a growing demand for energy as well. I remember as a student, especially in my engineering, during exam time, the power used to go off, as Murphy's law would have it, right? How many of you have experienced that, Anyone? You're preparing for your exam hard and then the power goes off. Things haven't changed much, have they? Right? It's a bit better though. But we have an satiating demand for power, for energy. So many vehicles on the streets, especially in Tier 1 cities, everyone now has 2 vehicles in their houses, right? We expect 24/7 power at home. So there is so much demand for energy, so many vehicles being pumped into. In fact, Bangalore is a great example. So many vehicles coming new onto the streets as well. There's a huge demand. And this is just not in Bangalore, guys, but this is globally as well. There is a huge demand. And then you look at the supply side. Of course, oil and gas has been the traditional supplier of energy, but then there is the renewable energy as well coming in. Now, we think at Shell that the traditional fuels like oil and gas will remain for the next few decades while the focus on cleaner energy also increases, right? So the traditional fuels are here to stay. And then finally you talked about the climate change. In 2015, which is I think 2 years back, there was this Paris Accord. More than 100 countries signed up to it and said, we will make sure that in this century the global warming and the temperature will not go by more than 2 degrees, right? So this century we got 80 years left. So in 80 years, they all promised that we'll make sure that there is limited global warming so that the world temperature does not increase by more than 2 degrees. Now, if you have read yesterday's or day before yesterday's newspaper, the probability of that happening is shrinking. And that's a scary feeling. All the countries committed to it, but the reality is, it's not going to be 2 degrees, it's going to be much higher. So these are the challenges we face in the energy industry. For every challenge, there's an opportunity, and that's where I'll go to next. So population, demand, supply, and climate change, right? This is what is happening in the energy industry. Let's talk about Shell in India. Shell started off in India in 1928, and we used to be known as Burma Shell then. You may not know that here, but I'm sure some of your folks in your family, parents, grandparents would know that because Burma Shell was a very big company and very popular company. So we have a long history in India from 1928 until 1976. And then Shell was taken over by the government of India. Right? In fact, in 28, it was the kerosene trading, that's where Shell started its business. In 1932, JRD Tata did a solo flight from Karachi to Bombay. It's not a quiz question. So he did that via Ahmedabad, and that was fueled, the flight was fueled by Shell. We've been there for a long while in India. Right, so after the nationalization, we exited India in 76, but we came back in 94, and since then, you can see on the left-hand side what all we do. So on the top left, at Hazira in Gujarat, we have our LNG regasification plant. So I talked about LNG a bit before. Taloja, we have a lubricants blending plant. This is our B2B. PMT is our Panna, Mukti, and Tapti. These are our 3 oil fields offshore that we acquired last year as a part of the BG acquisition. We acquired British Gas last year. So these are 3 fields offshore. MGL is our Mahanagar gas pipeline. In Bangalore, we have the P&T hub. We call that the projects and technologies. That's where all the research and all the work supporting the real business happens. And that's in Devnalli. It's the latest facility that has been created in Devnalli, state of the art. It has the research lab as well. Very close to the airport, and that was inaugurated a few months back. And on the outer ring road, we have the IT hub. I come from the IT hub, and that's on the outer ring road. Yeah. In addition, we have the aviation joint venture also based in Bangalore. In Chennai, we have the finance operations. So that's our presence in Chennai, and finally in Gurgaon is our headquarters. So that's a bit of a tour on Shell in India. Talking about Bangalore and talking about ITHB. ITHB stands for IT Hub Bangalore. So we are one of the 4 hubs today in IT, in Shell IT. The other 3 hubs are Houston, London, and The Hague. The Hague is in the Amsterdam, near Amsterdam. So we have only 4 hubs in IT now, and all the technology work is being consolidated into these 4 hubs. The Shell IT Hub was launched in 2015. in Outer Ring Road. Initially, we were in Eco Space. Now we have moved to Eco World. That's where our offices are, and that's our permanent location. A lot is happening in our office. It's a very vibrant culture. We are a large company, as I said, but we have the feel of a startup, right? And that's really key. We are a very, very big startup in Bangalore, right? And that's important to drive home as well. So over the years, we have had our CIO Jay Krotz and Nitin, our chairman for Shell India, come and talk about where they want to really take Shell and the IT hub in India. The piece at the bottom right talks about something known as the tectonic. The tectonic is all about getting energy from technology and using it back into Shell. So this was our event just about 2 weeks back in KTPO in Whitefield, where we celebrated technology, but we celebrated it in a way where our own staff came and said this is where they have worked in delivering value for Shell. And all the cool technology that we have in Shell was on display. So that's a bit about the journey in ITHB. We are growing. We are 2,000 people now. So in 1.5 years, grown from 0 to 2,000. That's absolutely mind-boggling if you look at the number of people we have hired and gotten into Shell. And we are looking for more smart people. So if anyone of you is interested, I encourage you to go to the stall, the Shell stall outside as well, and grab us when you have a minute. Right. So with that, probably switch gears a little bit, and we'll play a video for you. So SensorBot is our bionic robo, and no, I was talking about the value of innovation. So this robo was developed by Carnegie Mellon in their robotics library, and we use that technology along with them and along with our BAs in Shell to develop this. The reason we use this was two things. One, when you actually go to plants, and Kazakhstan is where we have actually used this, there are a huge amount of fields where you need to really manually go and walk and look at whether your operations are safe. The second thing is, from a hazard standpoint, because we are talking about gases including H2S, which is poisonous, it's much more easier to send a robo out there. So it's got a bionic arm, and it can actually crawl, as you saw. It can go on gravel as well. The reason I put this up here is we are just no longer a traditional oil and gas company. We're just not about extracting oil and getting it to you in the station. We are using a lot of technology, a lot of innovation, latest in robotics, and doing this in a very agile format, very quick format, so that we can actually get value to the business. So in this case, we reduce the cost of monitoring, and it is safe. So let's jump into the next case study, which is about the market hub. So I'll take a minute to explain this. So if you look at the left side, I spoke about the downstream business. The downstream business is all about once your oil and gas is ready and refined, we actually have to get it to where the demand is, right? So sales and marketing is typically where, and transport and trading, this is the downstream part of the business. What we found a couple of years back, way back in 2014, was all of these stakeholders that you see, the distributors, the retailers, the aviation, the marine, had so many different systems to really do their order management. It was very, very complex. No single sign-on, very slow, and it was one size fits everyone, right? But actually, we got 6,000 odd distributors 4,000 odd retailers. They're actually different customer categories if you look at them. But we had only one, actually no single sign-on, different suite of systems, not integrated, no single view of where the customer was. So the problem statement that we had way back in 2014 was the whole customer experience, and the speakers before have spoken about UX, CX, and so on. So this was broken in 2014. We had variety of customer experiences. Different look and feel, different login. In fact, there was no analytics as well, and it did not have multi-channel facilities. The technology was out of date, and whenever the business had to, let's say, do a bit of promotion, marketing, advertising, they had to do a piece of the process and then hand it over to IT, right? So there are multiple hops in this whole journey. And then a couple of smart people got together and said, what can we really do about it? So what we created was a single market hub, which was a one-stop shop for all of these customer groups, and that was created hand in hand with the customers. So the BAs actually sat with the customer groups from various teams that I described earlier, created personas for these groups based on which the UX and the CX came about. The system offered flexibility, scalability, single sign-on. At the same time, it was one solution but fit for everyone. Right? So great value came out of this because we had analytics. Now people could figure out where they need to focus on. Now if you are into B2B, it's all about customer loyalty, right? So in any business, it's about loyalty, whether you go to a marketplace, any of the marketplaces. If you can keep going back to the same place again, it drives the business. And it's all about retaining loyalty, and that's what happened in this case. The sales folks spent less time on IT, spent more time on what they were supposed to do, which is sell. And that's where I think IT plays a really big role. If you can enable the business to do what they're supposed to do, that's where there is real value. And that's where BAs come in. You have to make it a point that you're delivering what the customer wants and deliver value. Technology comes a bit later. Deliver value always. And that's what we did. Right, so here are the outcomes. It's been a long journey, started off in 2018. Rich customer experience. I spoke about personas, I spoke about multiple customer groups. This is what we got, enhanced customer experience. Sometimes it's an irony, right, that we have our mobile phone, we look at all the cool apps, but when we go into the office, our systems are not that cool. Those are the questions some of our customers were asking. Why is my personal experience on mobile apps so nice, so easy, but when I go into the office systems, they are legacy, they are so slow, no single sign-on, no analytics. And people like you and me are the real consumers as well, sitting inside Shell and asking exactly the same question. So think about that. Technology is a great enabler. So we use technology, we use the latest in technology to give them the performance, the scalability. Multi-channel experience is another thing. So today, if you go into your personal laptops, use your emails, go onto your mobile phones, emails, whether it's a Gmail or a Yahoo or whatever, it is always there, right? Multi-channel experience. But why don't we get it when we are at work? That was the question. So we actually provided that. So the system is compatible with mobility as well. It is a mobile solution, same information available to all the stakeholders. So we provided the value that the guys asked us. So different stakeholders within Shell got exactly what they wanted. Right? So that's about providing value. I spoke about that earlier as well. So in fact, some statistics, this has been now rolled out to 6,000 distributors, 4,500 retailers, 21 markets. Right? So it's been a massive success within Shell. And the journey goes on. More and more markets will be rolled out on this as well. Okay, so let me switch to the next case study. I think we'll start off with the video again.
2016, obviously, it's about steam blowing. Our pipes are behaving well. Nice white cloud. We're happy. Job done. When you see basically what you have designed through the years turning into life, that gives you a great feeling.
There she goes, pile number 5, going up in the air. 16 of these is what's going to hold Prelude in place for the next 25 years in Cyclone 5 conditions.
Now we need to be a bit quiet, because actually here we are running live plant. We are currently in the middle of steam blowing, and that means that we are running boilers. But what we do here is we generate steam. And with the steam we generate power, electricity, and the power that we need to be able to cool down the gas on the LNG side. So this is the heart. If we don't have steam, we will not have LNG, and we will not have anything else.
The well's now on, everybody's happy. So this will just continue, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This pipe's going just off the coast of Australia. We've got quite a way to go.
These guys, material handling team 3. So these guys have the job of carrying the insulation from here up the staircases to the work faces. It's an essential part of the process. So we're going to give out a little acknowledgement of what they're doing. Okay, JH Kip. We've got about 100,000 square meters, the equivalent to 20 soccer pitches or rugby pitches.
What's happening right now is we're about to install one of the flow line jumper spools. Very important part of the whole system. It transports gases from the production manifolds over to the plant so we can get it to the FLNG. All the years of hard work, all need to come together now. So it's really time to be able to do it right.
When you go there day to day, it's a bit difficult to see, but when I take visitors around here, every one of them are totally impressed with what the project team has achieved, and I think everybody have delivered very, very well in 2016 and can be very proud of what we have achieved.
No matter how many times I see this video, there's a lot of pride when we see this video again and again. Prelude is currently our pride in Shell. This is the largest floating LNG ship, if I can call it that, in the world. How many of you have been to Petronas or gone to KL, seen the Petronas Tower? Anyone? Yeah? Few up there. So this is as long as tall as the Petronas Tower, right? So that gives you a sense of the scale. It is the same length as 4 football fields put together. The amount of water it consumes per hour is 50 million liters of water per hour to cool the gas. And when it is fully loaded, it's 600,000 tons, right? So that's what this ship is about. So it's actually reached Australia, off the coast of Australia. It's going to be moored about 200 kilometers off the coast. It was actually built in South Korea. So let me talk about keeping Prelude safe, right? For those of you who've been associated somewhat with oil and gas, safety for us is paramount. Safety is what we really do every day. Every conversation in Shell starts with safety. Every key meeting in Shell starts with safety. So keeping Prelude safe is an important mission for us. Before that, I said this is an FLNG. The F stands for floating. I'll just take a few seconds to explain what floating means in the context of LNG. So as I said, LNG is about liquefying natural gas so that it's easier to transport. I said that bit earlier, right? Now, when you're 200 kilometers off the coast of Australia, you can build a lot of pipeline, dredge the coast, and then transport the gas to the land, right? Or you can actually take a ship like the Prelude, which is floating, and gasify at the source. That's what we're doing here. So we've taken Prelude. Prelude is nothing but a gasification plant. So it gasifies, it converts the natural gas to liquid at the source in this place. Then it's easier to to transport liquids to wherever you want it, wherever there's demand, right? And when it reaches there, the destination, it will be regasified, right? So we convert it back to gas. So that's an innovation itself. So FLNG ships are quite innovative in that sense that we are using a big fridge. This is essentially a big fridge, right? So we are just converting it into liquid at the source itself. So I talked about safety. So given that this is so long, 4 football fields of length, there's going to be a lot of people on the ship. Safety is extremely, extremely critical. At any given point in time, we want to know that all our staff are safe, the whole production facility is safe as well. At any given point in time, we want to know what are the hazards and we want to know what are the barriers, right? So what we did was we used a concept known as a bow tie. I don't know how many of you know the bow tie. Anyone know of this concept? So not many. So let me explain it with an example. So what we have at the top is the hazard. So taking an analogy of Bangalore again. So that would be, an hazard could be that you're driving a car. And then we come down and there's a top event. Top event is losing control of the car, right? A bow tie has a left-hand side and a right-hand side. The left-hand side is known as threats. The right-hand side is known as consequences. So threats could be, you've got a pothole on the roads, right? So that's a threat. So if that threat happens, you lose control of the car, right? So that's a top event. So a pothole is a threat. A spill or some liquid on the road is also a threat. You can lose control by slipping. So these are threats, as an example, that will make the top event happen, which leads to the hazard. There are ways to prevent the threat. So if you have ABS technology, most cars nowadays have ABS. It's an anti-skidding technology that will prevent the threat. Similarly, on the right-hand side, there is consequences, right? So if the event were to happen, there could be death, there could be injury, there could be accident, and so on. And if you're perhaps on a winding road in a mountain, and if there is a slippery surface, you could actually, fall into the gorge and have a serious incident. So there's consequences on the right side if the event were to happen. And then there could be barriers as well to prevent the consequences, right? So if you are on a winding road, you can actually have a barrier, a metal barrier, some of you might have seen, that prevents you from skidding off. Your seat belt is a barrier in the car, right? Your helmet is a barrier as well. If the event were to happen, it will prevent further damage. So bow tie has been there as a concept for quite some time. Now we applied that to Prelude and said, if we knew all the risks, all the threats of Prelude, because we know the walls which are there, we know the boilers that are there on the plant, we know the pipeline, we know the connections, we know the risers, we know when they are scheduled for maintenance, we know in which month, which year they're scheduled for maintenance, we know if the maintenance has not been done, we know the deviations in place, then we can actually abstract this layer and form a visual abstraction, a visual layer where someone who's in charge of Prelude from a safety standpoint can, at any given point in time, look at the threats and the consequences, right? So it is a visual dashboard essentially. and you can drill down and you can drill up if you want, but at any given point in time, this whole thing is visually available. So this has made life easier for a lot of people, because before they used to rely on a lot of systems and to actually dive in and find out where the threats were, what the consequences are. But for management and for the HSSE folks and the folks who are in charge of safety, nothing better than actually getting this in a visual format, right? And even people working on the actual ship, at any given point in time, you know what are the threats, consequences, and what are the state of the barriers. This whole thing was built in 3 months using Agile. So the BAs were a key part of this project. The data was available. So the data was available in multiple systems. The BAs figured out a way saying, so the data is available, and here is a problem statement. How can we actually make sense of the data which is in disparate different systems, combine that, organize the data, put it on a visual format. So the bow tie was the visual format that was selected, and then start looking at the risks, consequences, the barriers on the top event and the hazard, right? 3 months is all it's taken to build this and into production. So benefits are obvious. At any given point in time, anyone knows the cumulative risk, right? And the systems have been built in a way that there is automatic consolidation of the data. The risk identification resolution is also automatic, and there is also optionality given. This can be scaled to future solutions as well. So if you want another part of Prelude to be added onto this so that you know the risk of that area, that can be added as well. So it's very scalable. We then added a 3D model on top of that. So the bottom right, it's the ship 3D model. At any given point in time, visually you can find out what's happening in there from a risk management standpoint. So I come to the important bit. So if there's one slide I would want you to focus on, it is this one. And I think this marries a lot of what we heard earlier in the morning. So we'll start off from the bottom right. The basics for a business analyst is about knowing the content. It's about business process knowledge. You need to know the content. If you're in downstream, if you're in trading, if you're in upstream, if you're in production, or you're in an investment bank, I mean, this is universally applicable, or in retail, or in supply chain, you have to know the content, right? So get to know the business process very well. Invest time on that. Then a mindset of agility. How can you actually do this quickly, smartly, fast, and delivering the quality of the work? This is almost like the hygiene. So knowing the content, being agile, and delivering quality is the hygiene, right? So it's a given. We expect that from everyone. Then you move up a little bit. The BAs in Shell and the BAs of the future have to know what is the innovation going around in the world. What are the technologies that are being disruptive? In the case of SensorBot, which was a robot, we used a robotics example. That was innovation. It was a bit of disruption. You need to know where the SMAC is taking the world. SMAC, I think we heard before, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud. We talked about how in Prelude analytics is being used. So we need to look at where are there use cases for this stack, right? Cloud can actually reduce your cost significantly. But in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of cloud usage already. Now the next question is, can you go on from an infrastructure as a service to software as a service? Shell is focusing on market standards. What that means is we want to go more and more towards standard solutions that reduces our operating costs. So as BAs, I really encourage you to look at what is happening out there in terms of technology, right? Be very close to that. And then the last one, which I think is almost the crowning glory, if I can call it that, is discovery that consists of being close to the customer. Customer centricity, I think, is absolutely key. The market hub example that I took, that was the case study in B2B downstream, was all about customer centricity. If the customer can get what he wants, and we get what we want, is to offer a scalable solution, multi-channel, single user experience. If you can provide customer centricity, that's when I think you're really delivering value. The other two things there are leveraging the external ecosystem. In this case, we used Carnegie Mellon's technology around robotics. In the case of Prelude, we used the Bowtie XP as an external input on how to visualize this whole thing. Are you aware of what is happening out there in the external ecosystem? The ecosystem consists of vendors, it consists of today, the distinguished speaker from NASSCOM was talking about where the government of India wants to take the BA community, where NASSCOM wants to take the BA community. Are you aware about what Forrester and Gartner want to do in this space? So that's the external ecosystem, right? It's just not your company. We exist in an ecosystem. We have to absolutely know where the ecosystem is headed. The last one, competitive landscape. This relates a bit similar. It's about the market. Where is the market headed, right? Have you done a market scan? Do you know what is the latest happening out there? Do you know what your competitors are doing? Do you know what your peers are doing in the industry, right? And this is about, you can then decide whether you want to be similar to them, because it could be a commodity function, or you want to be a bit of a differentiator, right? So you absolutely have to know the competitive landscape, right? So for me and for us in Shell, this is extremely key. Get your basics, know where technology is headed, and discover and focus on customer centricity. Right, so as I come towards the end of this session, I think I started off by saying where the energy industry is headed. Massive transition, a lot of changes, including climate, massive transition in India as well. We are anticipating a big push towards cleaner energy. However, there is going to be the traditional fuels as well for the next few decades to come. There are pressures on the oil price, but I think that's also an opportunity. So when there's pressures on oil price, there's also an opportunity to innovate to keep your OpEx almost flat or even optimize. And lastly, if you're a truly agile organization, I think you can deliver superior customer experience. And for us, some of us in IT, that means digital experience as well, right? So IT is there to serve the business, let's not forget that. So it's all about delivering value and delivering superior customer experience, right? So if you balance that with innovation and agility, you will deliver real value. Right, so any questions? Okay, there's one there in the middle. Two. Okay, come to you in a minute.
Hi. So one of the biggest factors in Agile, when you're doing Agile, is about delivering incremental value. And Shell being such a really old company, I'm pretty sure that things were done in a very certain way. It took time. Well, the entire organization can never really truly be agile. If you want to keep safety, hazards, and all that in check, there are certain things that you need to do. You can't really build something and measure so that you deliver something and then you incrementally change the value of that all over again. How did that really impact? How did bringing Agile to an IT department here impact the way how Shell works? That's what I want to know.
Okay. So traditionally, I think a lot of the IT work that was being done in Shell was waterfall, right? I mean, that's what all of us know when IT industry really started off. Now, Agile is a necessity now. It's not an option, right? So taking the Prelude example, the boat is out there. We had to deliver visualization in 3 months. It's not an option to think of Agile. It is the way that we have to operate today. It's not a choice. And then you add the operational challenge because the oil price is quite low right now at 50. So that's a huge significant pressure on OpEx. When there is pressure on OpEx, you need to innovate. You need to really look at what is it that you can quickly deliver value, right? So the whole mindset of the organization today is tuned towards Agile. And that's where we are getting real benefit in delivering quick iterations, quick sprints, measuring the output of every sprint and seeing whether it's actually meeting the requirements, right? So I think there's a cultural element as well, where the environment in the organization is completely supportive of Agile. The commercial world that we live in is pushing us in that direction as well. So it's no longer one of choice, it's inevitable. So we are there as well. I hope it answered a part of your question. Okay, there's one here.
Yeah, I'm Vivek from Capgemini Consulting. So currently, as we see, we are moving towards an age of agility in terms of business requirements and everything. And also there is a current say, or the need of the hour is like innovate. Being a business analyst, we are talking about automation as well. So just from a perspective of having innovation in your how you do business at Cell, so everybody does automation nowadays, thinking of automation. So for me, automation is cutting down human interaction from the business, making it seamless. But at a point in time, does Cell also feel the need of adding the bit of intelligence into automation? So for me, it would be automation. So where we add a bit of intelligence into what we do or innovate to do our business from a business analysis perspective, where we are and how Cell is looking forward to it with not removing completely the human aspect of it or the physical aspect of it, but how the human intelligence can be embedded into the current day business analysis. I know Agile is moving, and going forward there would be a concept, we call it a super Agile maybe, but how the intelligence part of it will affect the innovation at Cell in next few years.
I think it's a great question. Thanks for asking that. My view is, if you look at the sense about robotics example that we presented earlier this morning. So we had technology, we had innovative technology from Carnegie Mellon, it was robotics. The person who's actually operating that is a human being. So it's not completely robotics. We just can't leave a robot on its own in a field to go and actually monitor the field. So there is the intelligence. The person is actually operating it. The person is absolutely key. So I think it's a symbiotic relationship between the operator in this instance, the person running the robot, and the robot itself that's been built through innovation. So there's another example, by the way. We use drones. So I keep going back to examples because I thought we heard that we are a traditional company, more than 100 years old. All we are doing is to lift the pump from the gas station. No. So hopefully I've changed that perception a little bit. So we're using drones in Australia to actually look at some of our plants and look at the risers. Those drones don't fly automatically. There is a person who's flying them and actually taking the input and seeing where you need to do the next maintenance. Right? So I don't think automation on its own can be independent. It has always to be complemented with human intelligence. Okay. There's one there.
Hi.
Okay. The lady perhaps next. I'll start off with you, sir.
Hi. My name is Nimisha and I'm from Capgemini Consulting. You mentioned that Shell is also working in clean energy. Has your BA team done anything innovative or interesting or recently about any projects in that space?
I wouldn't call it the BA team, I think, but I'll broadly use that as the consulting team. I was mentioning about the P&T hub in Bangalore in Devanali, right, and the IH2 technology. So that's our showpiece right now, where we want to spend a lot of time and energy. The technology itself is proprietary. It was developed by the Gas Technology Institute in the US, and it's been licensed out to another party. We are providing catalysts to make that actually work. And so it's still at the start of that journey. I don't think it's come down to IT yet, but our people, our business domain experts in the P&T hub in Devanali are actually working on that technology with IH2 and looking at how catalysts can be added to add value to that whole mix. So the answer to that is yes, they are in that space as well. Okay. you had a question.
Hi, my name is Venkat. I just want to go back to the example of the Prelude. So the data analytics application that you built in an agile manner took about 3 months, is what you said. So generally, all these oil companies work with a lot of, companies, especially OFS, and I'm sure there is a lot of OT and IoT integrations all in the data analytics. So I wanted to ask you, what are the challenges that you face when you work with multi-team, multi-vendors, especially given the small 3-month window where you have to deliver a product?
Yeah, that's also a good question. In this instance, the applications that were already being used to collect the data and organize the data were applications that we already knew. But I'll use that question a bit more broadly, right? So what I did not speak about is the process control domain. Process control domain is the rig itself or the plant itself where the action happens. And they have complex IT systems, which is different from the office domain that we sit in. So we sit in offices, we have our own suite of applications. But the process control domain is an extremely different ecosystem where they have their own sophisticated industrial energy systems, right? So it's very important that we work closely with all of these parties in the ecosystem, because the office domain and the process control domain keep talking to each other. The information from the if you're exploring or on a production site is actually flowing back in the office domain. So we actually make sure that there's a representative from all of these teams as a part of that natural team. So we call it the natural team in Shell. So that's a term that we would keep using. So we work in natural teams in Shell, right? So we make sure that there's a person from architecture, there's a person from the BA community, there is a project manager, there's a person from process control domain, if that is the data that's coming in, there's a person from PNT, and create this natural team and make sure that it is led by a PM or a Scrum Master, depending on what the case might be. And for us, that is the DNA based on which Shell has been successful over so many decades and years. So for us, collaboration, it's also one of the behaviors in our, so we are at the end of the year measured on how well we collaborate with our own partners internally. So including all my Shell colleagues here and I will be measured on collaboration. So that's extremely key for our success as well. So hope that answered a little bit of what you asked. Looks like we are a bit beyond time, so I'll try to wrap up. So I want to thank the BA convention and IIBA, Ashish, for calling us here today. Hopefully, I've given you a perspective of what agility is in oil and gas. I'll go back to where I started. We are not just a company that pumps fuel out of your retail pump. I've changed a little bit of perception, I hope, today in terms of the amount of technology we use. So we use everything. IoT, before it was called IoT, because we got sensors. We actually got sensors pulling out fuel. And gas, we got robotic process automation, we got SAP HANA, you name it and we have it. We got all the technology. The IT hub in Bangalore is 2,000 people strong, aggressively recruiting. So if you're interested, I would really encourage you to walk up to the stall. So we got all the technology. The BA stream is a strong focus for us. And with that, I would like to call two people who've been at the forefront of the BA community in Shell. So Keshav and Danya, if you can join me up, please. I'll introduce them in a minute. So we think we are moving to an agile world in Shell. So we already are there. And hopefully some of the perspectives I shared on what it takes to be a great BA was useful for you as well. So Keshav runs our PM and BA community globally for Shell. So he's going to be around if you have a few minutes during the breaks to talk to him about. And Danya is our BA community lead in Bangalore. So she leads the BA community as well. With that, a big thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Kartik. That was a wonderful presentation. The tour on Shell, the IT hubs, the interesting videos that you showed on robotics, and the safety measures that you have on Prelude. Amazing.